afternoon. Thank you all for coming to our exempt determination training. This is an IRB workshop to help you determine whether or not you should apply for exempt review or expedited review of your human subjects research project. Today we're going to answer these questions. We're going to help you answer the question, am I doing research with human subjects? What level of review does my project need? And which application form do I fill out? If you have questions as we're going, that's fine, but I will also have time for questions at the end. So I think if something I'm saying is confusing and you want to stop, let me know. But if you think of questions that can wait till the end, just jot them down or something. Okay, the federal government has developed a very specific definition of human subjects research that requires IRB review. Research in this definition is a systematic investigation, including research development, testing, and evaluation designed to develop or contribute to generalizable knowledge. Some things that aren't research according to this definition would include oral history or journalism projects, projects to improve curricula offerings on UTC's campus, UTC teacher and student evaluations, marketing research, and among a few other things. Okay, human subjects are living individuals about whom an investigator, whether professional or student, conducting research, obtains information or biospecimens through intervention or interaction with the individual, and uses, studies, or analyzes the information or biospecimens, or obtains, uses, studies, analyzes, or generates identifiable private information or identifiable biospecimens. Some things that don't necessarily qualify as human subjects would be de-identified or anonymous secondary data from a source that originally collected the data for a different purpose, or information related to deceased individuals. We have a tool, it's a relatively new tool, so if you've already been familiar with the IRB, this will be new to you. That is our human subjects decision tree. You guys have a printout, and I'm just gonna pull it up here. Okay, so when you're trying to figure out if you are doing research with human subjects, you can ask yourself these questions that are on this tool. So let's look at it. It's going to ask you if you are observing, interacting with, or intervening with individuals to gather information. Here are some examples of that. And if you answer yes, you continue with the flow chart. If you answer no, you will be using existing data. Well, then we're going to go to the second page of this chart. So let's keep this in mind. Look at your chart in front of you, and let's talk about an example. Okay, so this first example is Dr. Gutenberg heard that a colleague of hers at the University of Kentucky recently did a study on the class study habits of female college students compared to male college students at UK. Dr. Gutenberg asks her UK colleague if she can use the raw data from that study as the basis for her own study on the study habits of college freshmen compared with seniors. She discovers that the UK researcher did in fact collect information on class standings in the original data and would be happy to share his data with Dr. Gutenberg. He removes all identifiers from the data set and sends it to Dr. Gutenberg to use in her research. So is Dr. Gutenberg doing human subjects research? Does anybody have a guess or already know right off the bat?
I think no.
No, yes. Do you know why?
Because she's using existing data that was collected for her terms.
Yes, that's right. So she's working with anonymous data. She is not doing human subjects research, and she does not need to submit an application to the IRB. Yes?
But isn't she going to continue the research with new students?
That's not listed here. If she were going to continue the research with new students, that would be a separate IRB project. She could do a similar research study at UTC here, and she could interview or survey students here, and that would be a separate side project. She could then combine it with the de-identified anonymous data. But if this is strictly what she's doing, saying, well, my colleague at UK already went through the trouble of surveying thousands of students, for instance, I'm going to just use his data. So because it is de-identified, it's not human subject. All right, one more example here. Mary wants to learn more about the hiring procedures at several local businesses. She's a business major, let's say. She plans to call the HR managers and interview them over the phone, asking questions such as, how many applications do you receive each day? How many positions does your company need to fill each month? And what is your hire rate for applications received? Is Mary doing human subjects research? You are gathering information by interacting with individuals. So the answer here is yes, but this next question says, is the information being collected about individuals? The answer here is no. We are not asking the individuals for their opinions on the hiring processes. We are asking for factual information about the HR hiring processes. So it says the focus of the project is only on products, methods, policies, procedures, organizations. Example, interviewing transportation staff and officials about parking or transportation policies and procedures. So good job, you guys are 2 for 2 on guessing which one it is. I hope that you find this flowchart useful. The second page is the page about existing data and whether or not that makes it qualify as human subjects research. So this is offered on our website. You can find it when you click on the Who Needs to Apply button, so you can decide if you need to apply for IRB approval. Okay. A note about the intent to publish. One thing I didn't talk about with those previous 2 examples was whether or not these students and professors wanted to publish their research. Something that gets confusing sometimes is people think, well, I want to publish this, so I need IRB approval. The previous examples we talked about would not be considered human subjects research even if they want to publish their findings. Sometimes students do research in their classroom settings and they have no intention to publish, even though they would be doing something that would otherwise be considered human subjects research. So even if they're surveying people and getting their opinions, if they will not take that outside of their classroom, it is not contributing to generalizable knowledge. So in those cases, those kind of projects can be handled by a classroom exemption, which we cover in our IRB basics training. It's just a way of getting, just basically making sure professors understand IRB rules and making sure we kind of know about these projects, but they are not actually doing human subjects research. That is just one note there. All right. So chances are, if your research, it does involve interacting with people in some way, you will need to submit an application to the IRB, and that's why we're here. So the next step, what are we gonna do? In our IRB basics training, we go over 5 steps to submitting an application. And today we're really gonna focus here on step number 2, which is to determine the level of review that your project needs. We have 2 different application processes for the different levels of review, so you have to determine for yourself what level of review your project needs. Expedited and exempt are just 2 terms that describe the level of risk that a project poses and hence the level of review required for the project. Exempt applications are the lowest risk. They are reviewed by ORI and given an exemption determination letter. Expedited applications are minimal risk. They are reviewed by 2 IRB members and they get an IRB approval letter. Full board application is for any projects that are greater than minimal risk. They are reviewed by the full board, full IRB committee, and they will get an approval letter. Okay, there are 6 categories of exemptions as defined in the federal regulations. These 6 categories are here. I'm going to read them for you, and then we will look at each one of these more closely. So, educational research using normal educational practices, educational tests, surveys, interviews, and public observation, non-medical benign behavioral interventions, secondary research on existing data, projects supported by a federal agency and designed to study public benefit or service programs, and taste and food quality evaluation. Okay, category 1, research in established or commonly accepted education settings. These are, again, repeat myself, research in established or commonly accepted education settings that involve normal educational practices. This is not likely to adversely impact students' opportunity to learn or the assessment of educators. So this category, along with some of the others with caveats, can apply even with children as the human subjects. So you can, if you're doing normal educational practices in commonly accepted educational settings with children, you can still qualify for an exemption. There are, most of the categories we're going to go through, you're not able to use an exemption when you're working with children. Okay, category 2 is educational tests, surveys, interviews, and public observation. So for this category, research only includes educational tests, surveys, interviews, public observation, if at least one of the following criteria are met. So to be exempt, these interviews and surveys have to meet one of these criteria. Recorded information cannot readily identify the subject, directly or indirectly. So this is what we typically refer to as anonymous surveys. Any disclosure of responses outside the research would not reasonably place the subject at risk for criminal, civil liability, financial, employability, educational advancement, or reputation, or even if, even if the information can identify the subject and the responses may have some risk, you could still be exempt if information is recorded with identifiers and IRB conducts a limited IRB review. So we're going to go over what that means a little bit later, but one of these 3 criteria has to be met for this exemption to qualify. Okay. This category is for data collection only. It may not include interventions with the subjects, but it can include visual or auditory recording. Under this exemption, you are not allowed to survey or interview children. You would need an expedited application for that. Okay, category 3, benign behavioral interventions. If you've done research with the IRB in the past, this is a new category that has been added as an exempt category since January. In the past, you weren't able to do any sort of interventions under exempt. But now, as long as the interventions are benign, you can use this exemption. So, research involving benign behavioral interventions through verbal, written responses, including data entry or audiovisual recording, from adult subject who prospectively agrees, and one of the following criteria are met. So these criteria are the same 3 criteria as the previous category. The same thing applies. It either needs to be anonymous, or if their identities were known, there's not a risk of damage to their reputation, or it goes through a limited IRB review. This one also may not include children or involve medical interventions. So anything medical is not going to qualify as a benign behavioral intervention. BBI must be brief in duration, painless, harmless, not physically invasive, along with other conditions listed on the exemption category definition sheet. So you actually have exemption definition sheets in front of you as well. We're going to look at those a little bit in a minute, but they list a lot of exclusions and definitions for you. Okay, category 4, we're going to talk about secondary data. So we talked about de-identified data earlier when we covered whether or not your project is considered HSR. However, there are times when you might have access to identifiable secondary data. That is where this category comes in. This often applies when researchers look at patient charts in clinics and use that data for their research. So to be exempt under this category, the researcher must record the information from the patient file in a way that the patient can't be identified. So the researcher has access to the patient's name and private information, therefore it's not anonymous, but the researcher does not remove that information from the clinic or the doctor's office or the patient file. So somebody goes in and looks at a patient file and records the data in a way that can't be traced back. That would be under this second bullet point. Another bullet point would be publicly available information, even if it is identifiable. Another criteria would be use of identifiable health information when use is regulated by HIPAA, as in healthcare operations or research or public health activities and purposes, or the information is collected by or on behalf of the federal government using government-generated or collected information obtained for non-research activities. Okay, so that's a big one. This has a lot of stuff going on in it. All right, categories 5 and 6, we don't really see a lot of on our campus, but category 5 would apply for research and demonstration projects supported by a federal agency or department and designed to study public benefit or service programs. And category 6 involves taste and food quality. There is not really a reason to memorize these categories and all of their details. We have the tools available on our website to help you when you want to make sense of your own project and guide you through the process. And we're going to look at that in just a minute. So this is our exemption categories sheet. I'm not going to go over it in detail because I just read all of our categories. It's broken down into the larger categories by category 1, 2, 3, 4, etc. And it lists all of the caveats, exclusions, etc. So this is available on our website. I'll show you when we get toward the end, like where on our website you can find all of this. But it's available to you. The other tool that we have to help you determine exemption categories is our exemption decision charts to figure out if your project is eligible for exemption. So this is, I think, handout number 3 or whatever in your stack. You can see it. It might be easier for you to look at your handout, or you can look up here, which is fine. But we're going to talk about some examples of research that may or may not be considered exempt. So, for this example, Dr. Johnson wants to study drug and alcohol abuse on UTC's campus. He's going to distribute an anonymous survey via email and Blackboard links to the entire student population to get as many participants as possible. He's going to ask questions about the students' drug and alcohol use, as well as demographics such as age, race, gender, and parental household income. Is his research exempt? And if so, under what category would it be exempt? Does anybody have, yes?
2, but with a limited IRB review, maybe?
Okay, you're close.
Okay.
It is 2. If we look at the, let's just look at this chart here. So it has to meet one of these criteria, and the criteria it actually meets is that the recorded information cannot readily identify the subject, either directly or indirectly. So
Because
because it's
it's anonymous?
anonymous specifically.
Can I ask a question about
Yeah.
that actually? Because if your survey is collecting IP addresses, is that still considered anonymous?
We always encourage them not to collect it. I know with Qualtrics you can actually opt out of.
Yeah, is that a requirement?
I usually just go with the word of the researcher saying it's anonymous, and I can tell that they're just sending out a link and people can fill out the email, because tracking IP addresses is kind of difficult and
Yeah.
would require effort that would be above readily identifying the subject. So
So
It's-
you would have to do a lot of work to get back to the person?
yes,
Okay,
exactly.
so it's still okay?
So it's really okay.
Okay.
I think if you were really doing, I mean, this could really place subjects at risk, right?
Yeah.
I mean, if you found out about some illegal drug or alcohol use, that could be really risky. So it might be in something like that I might go back to the researcher, and it's also on the researcher to really be ethical, I guess, and just keep it safe. So yeah, you can opt out of collecting IP addresses, at least through
Yeah,
certain survey methods. I'm not really sure on that
yeah,
one.
you can.
Okay, so, and you're right, if we were collecting identifiers, we would definitely need it to go through a limited IRB review. And I still will get to that. We'll talk about what that means in just a minute. And it shows right here what the IRB limited review means. It's being reviewed for privacy and confidentiality protections. So that is important.
So that, sorry.
No, it's okay.
That would be the way in which the researcher is housing and maintaining the data, right?
Yes.
So a good data plan could actually be okay ultimately. Okay.
Yes, for instance, if Dr. Johnson wanted to interview students and really get a qualitative response, that would be possibly highly problematic. But if he were careful enough about it and had a really good data collection plan and was able to keep their privacy protected, then possibly it could go through as a research project.
Okay. In the exempt even? In that case?
Maybe.
I would think
That's
that-
that's what it is saying.
Okay.
So it is saying that as long as, so what would happen is two IRB reviewers would get it and they would say, okay, the data protection plan is adequate. It may involve though, making sure that participants go to a location that would be private, making sure that they're not just, oh, we're advertising, we're a drug and abuse research project, come on in and talk to us, because that alone, just the students showing up for that research project could be compromising. So, and then if the IRB committee saw it and thought that there were other problems, they could kick it up to an expedited review. So theoretically, yes, it could still be exempt as long as your data plan is secure, but the IRB committee would also review it.
So another question along those same
Yeah.
lines, if it's okay.
Uh-huh.
So let's say Dr. Johnson does somehow, this would be wholly unethical, but still somehow decides to collect the names of the participants, but the results of each survey are assigned like a random number that he could then link back to the participants' names, but if someone actually got the survey data directly, they wouldn't be able to identify that. How would that change that then?
That still falls into this III category. It still could be exempt, but you would have to show that the data plan was in place. So in other words, you would keep those names and the code connection list locked away separate from the data points. And as long as the IRB was happy with that, then it would work. Okay, let's try another example. We've got a few others to work through, so let's see. And it might help make it more clear too. Okay, so Dr. Johnson's research is about a sensitive topic that could have serious consequences for respondents if their identity were known. Therefore, he has made the survey anonymous, so there's no way of tracing answers back to any students. This is anonymous and exempt under category 2I. All right, Dr. Smith wants to understand the experiences of LGBTQ students on UTC's campus and wants to interview them with questions about how they're treated, whether or not they have the support of their parents at home, about their circle of friends, and any ideas they have for improving campus life for LGBTQ students. Is her research exempt, and if so, under what category? I'm gonna actually, we kind of talked about this a little bit with our last one, but let me just go through the flow chart since we haven't done that yet with you guys. So we're gonna go here, we're gonna start at the beginning, we're just gonna walk through our flow chart. It says, you are conducting human participant research. Participant population includes prisoners, yes or no? No, it doesn't. Some prisoners might be included, just, who knows, they might just randomly be part of your population. Are you collecting data or biomaterials for research via interaction or intervention? Yes, we are. So let's go to category 1, it says. So I'm gonna scroll down to category 1. Does exemption category 1 apply? Is research conducted in normal educational settings? No. Okay, so now it says, could be exempt under 2, 3, 5, or 6. So let's try category 2. Is it observation of public behavior? No. Does it involve educational tests? No. Does it involve survey or interview procedures? Yes. Okay. Are minors enrolled in the study? No. We're going to stick with college students here. Are we going to record personal identifiers? Well, we're going to know who these participants are. We we will get their signature of consent. So yes, we are going to be collecting personal identifiers. Could the disclosure reasonably place participants at risk? Anybody want to answer that? Yeah.
I think so.
I think so. We don't know whether LGBTQ students on campus are going to come who have not really been public about their identity, and they might not want everybody to know that they're coming to participate in an LGBTQ study specifically. So, yes, it could. So this says our next stop is limited IRB review for adequate provisions to protect the privacy of subjects and to maintain the confidentiality of data. So then the question is, are the provisions adequate? And if yes, it will be exempt under category 2. So we are going to, what's better up here, Tess? So because some participants may not be out publicly, this type of research could potentially cause harm to participants if their identities were known. Dr. Smith can't do this anonymously due to the nature of interviews, but this project can still be exempt under category 2 III with the additional step of limited IRB review to ensure the confidentiality of the data. All right, I've touched on this a tad, but now that we're really officially here, exempt categories 2 III and 3 III, that's the benign behavioral interventions one, require that the IRB complete a limited IRB review, which ensures that there are adequate provisions in place to protect the privacy of subjects and maintain the confidentiality of data. If your research is exempt in these categories, then you will need to complete section I on Form D, the application for exempt designation. The IRB chair will review and approve this section of the application before an exemption designation letter can be issued. Okay, questions? We're gonna go ahead and go to the next example. Example number 5. Dr. Weatherly. Dr. Weatherly is interested in how certain foster parent behaviors affect the scholastic achievement of foster children in their care. Dr. Weatherly plans to solicit the participation of foster children between the ages of 14 to 17 through open Facebook groups. Once these children volunteer, Dr. Weatherly will administer an online survey asking them questions about their school and home life experiences and may reach out to them to conduct short follow-up interviews via Skype. So is her research exempt? Go back. I know I keep switching back and forth.
No, it's children.
Right, okay, good job, good job. You guys are winning here, you're doing a really great job. So in our, it would be a survey or interview, but in our exempt categories, we see that no children can be surveyed or interviewed under an exempt category. So this, Dr. Weatherly will need to submit an expedited application instead of an exempt application.
Can I ask a question?
Yes?
If minors weren't involved with that particular style, and are you able to do a survey, ask for volunteer contact information for follow-up interviews in an exempt project?
So if you had the contact information and you were gonna go ahead and interview, it could still qualify as exempt under the, whether or not this would be harmful for
Okay.
participants or whether or not it goes through a limited IRB review.
Okay.
So if you felt like it was risk for harm for the participants, it would go through a limited IRB review.
And let's say we thought it wasn't risky and we put through that application, the process is very much like guided, right? If there is a risk that we just didn't think about, we'll just be told and then we'll just modify it?
Right, so
Okay.
you have to submit your research questions, your survey questions, your interview questions. And so I look at that when it comes into the Office of Research Integrity and decide level of risk from what I can decipher to. It helps if you can pinpoint your own level of risk because you're more familiar with the research. And so, but by the time it gets to me, I can review it as well.
Okay.
All right, I think this is our last example. Joey is investigating the effects of physical therapy on participants with knee injuries. Participants will attend twice weekly PT sessions and perform a jump test with their jump height measured once a week to look for improvement. The study will follow each participant for 4 weeks and measure improvement over that time. Would this be exempt or expedited? because this study involves medical interventions and while still being minimal risk, does not qualify for exempt review. So Joey should submit a Form A for expedited review. All right, expedited research, just a little note here. Expedited research involves research activities that present no more than minimal risk to human subjects and involve procedures that fall into 9 federally defined categories. If your research does not qualify for an exempt determination, you should submit a Form A application for expedited or full board review, and the Office of Research Integrity will determine whether your project qualifies for expedited review or whether it will need to be reviewed by the full board. Some additional examples of projects that would not qualify for exempt review and so would fall into the expedited category would be projects involving exercise, research with prisoners or other vulnerable subjects, and long-term studies about health choices, for instance. All right, so step 3 of this process and beyond. Once you determine the level of review you need, you are ready to move on to step 3, which is to complete the application. Research eligible for an exemption determination will complete a Form B, application for exemption designation. Research not eligible for an exemption determination will complete a Form A, an application for expedited or full board review. All applications, Form A or Form D, are submitted electronically to instrb@utc.edu, and you'll be notified via email with status updates. Okay, I told you I would show you really quick, and I'm going to look at our website for you. I can find it quickly. So we can just go directly to utc.edu/IRB. Will get us directly here. Thank you. The Who Needs to Apply link is where you find the Human Subjects Research Decision Tree. The IRB application process, you can click on Apply for Approval, and this is all you need to know, all of your steps about applying for approval. So exemption category definition sheet, exemption category determination flow chart. They are linked here in step 1, but they are also over here on the right-hand side as big buttons. The applications are under step 2, and you can just go from there. We also have a informed consent page. I'm just pointing out because that is very helpful for people submitting applications. And there's a lot more information in our IRB Basics training about informed consent, about completing prior training, and other parts of the IRB process. But for now, other than sharing our contact information with you, that is really all I have.